Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Welcome to the Sunday Frontline Update. I will be considering going forward if it's worth doing the Frontline Update every week because in weeks like these, when the general consensus on what's happening on the front line is there and there is no major developments, so me just talking about where Russians moved a little bit just paints a little bit inadequate picture. But in general terms, by this point, we can say that Russian advances have slowed down. Some analysts are stating that the tempo of Russian advances have fallen pre-summer offensive levels. We don't know if it's now just while they are regrouping or this is just a general slowdown on the front line. But we will see that Russians are advancing on parts of the front line. It's just important to always have the big picture in mind that, yes, while this is a tendency, it also is slowing down and Ukrainians are doing well in their defense. To keep it short and simple, I will focus on parts of the front line where things are developing. For the rest of the front line, please watch my last video because it's pretty much what it is. Now, we start by looking at the Southern Donetsk direction. And here, Russians are continuing their advances around the Southern Donetsk. And notably, in this area, it was General Syrskyi that actually dismissed two commanders of the corps units because they are not fully adequately commanding their corps. And this is a first major change and shakeup in the core structure. I think this is fine. It is important right now to find the right people for the right job. So the new core system, it is still very raw. So it's good to hear that Syrskyi is considering what he can do and who are the people that can actually deliver the results that he needs. We know that Russians have been reinforcing and pulling in additional resources in the area, making the situation a little bit more difficult for the Ukrainian defenders. Russians have been moving a little bit around the southern edge of Pokrovsk, so moving lengthwise towards the east. Additionally, the newly arrived Russian forces are working hard to prevent the encirclement of this whole Russian grouping around the north of Mirnograd-Pokrovsk agglomeration. Specifically, there was this risk for Russians, we talked about it, where Ukrainians attacked both from the north and from the south. And newly reinforced Russian units actually came in and counterattacked Ukrainians, both at Razine right over here, but also at the northern part of Novoekonomichne, pushing some of the Ukrainians back, basically negating the ability of Ukrainians to cut off this big part of Russians advancing. Moreover, Russians are continuing putting in a lot of the people and efforts into this area, specifically fighting for Rodinske. But they're also trying to break through to their, I know it looks weird because things are here like encircled or at least semi-encircled, but it's not a full physical encirclement. Most of it is done by drones, and a lot of the Russian logistics right now in the area is done by drones. The fact that they cannot just drive a lot of the trucks and vehicles to deliver stuff, it doesn't matter if there is just notable forces in the area, but these forces can still be supplied by the drone units, and this is unfortunately the case. So, for example, while in this area Russians have been physically encircled for a while now, they're still being supplied, so that means they can just continue being in encirclement, so to say. But it's worth noting that Ukrainians in this area have been successful. They've been successful, as I said, at working towards the south, but they also worked towards cutting off the main entrance point to this breakthrough towards the north. And we saw Ukrainians successfully attack and almost already cut off this whole northern grouping of Russian forces. And this northern grouping is actually quite weird, because one would think that the orders would be, hey, guys, you're going to be cut off, so you need to now fight backwards, so to say, to help us reestablish this corridor. But that is not what they're doing. The orders that Russians are receiving while being in this semi-encirclement is actually to move forward, to move towards other directions, to move northwards and so on. And instead, this whole starting point, this neck, the bottleneck, so to say, this is actually just being defended by newly coming in Russian forces. So Ukrainians are really trying to do as much as they can, but they are limited in their capabilities as Russians do have the numerical advantage in the area. Now, touching upon the other parts of the front line, it is worth noting about the Siversk direction. As I said, now with the fall of the forest, Siversk should be preparing for the fall. But so far, it seems Russians are more interested going westwards rather than going southwards and closing in on Siversk. So right now, Ukrainians, as far as I know, as far as I hear, are trying to reinforce this area additionally and prepare the fight for Siversk. But I would expect, knowing the terrain and that it's not very nice area for Russians to fight it, it's pretty unfavorable for the attacking force, that instead they would want to kind of just cut it all off and not fight for this pocket altogether. Instead, Russians want to focus on Lyman. Lyman is gateway to Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, the heart of this Donetsk, Donbas defense platform. It's two big cities, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, that are actually so sort of a big and sprawled that they're creating this huge chain of buildings. It's very hard to storm. It is like a fortress within the area. It is Russians' most and the biggest challenge that they will ever see in this war so far. They are still not close, despite the fact that the road to Sloviansk right now is already under Russian attacks by drones, so it's a little bit more difficult to deliver new supplies there. But there is plenty of supplies already in the area. It is a fortress, and Lyman is what essentially allows the northern part to be secured. So if Russians will take Lyman, essentially we can say that it is now the countdown has started for the northern part of this agglomeration to be sieged by Russians. And with situation around Lyman, there are a couple of main parts we were looking at, and unfortunately they're not developing in favorable Ukrainian way. This is due to a couple of parts. This is the tax, so to say, that Ukraine is paying for the fuck up with the Dobropilya breakthrough. So the units that were additionally sent to reinforce this breakthrough to be secured are the units that were here to help secure the defenses around Lyman. So a lot of the defenses in the area are actually manned by the territorial defense units. And while there are certain better defense units and then there are certain worse, it is still a problem because, like, right now there is just not enough for Ukraine to rely on. Like, everyone needs to be well trained and defended in their area. And that's why when there's certain fire brigades like they're capable of, like, if there is a breakthrough with certain less than well equipped and trained units, then there should be some kind of a fire brigade, firefighting brigade that comes in and tries to prevent further breakthroughs, so at least the other units can regroup and prepare for the new positions. But this has been now pulled, so the taxes that Ukraine is paying is Russians advancing in this direction. And there are a couple of developments here that have actually started. First one is Zarychne. Ukrainians tried to counterattack in Zarychne, but they were not successful. So now Russians are establishing themselves in Zarychne. They have not advanced further, but it feels that it's more of an inevitability that because Russians were able to advance also to the north, so they will be able to establish this line and essentially move towards Stavki and try to more or less siege Lyman towards this northeastern side. Then if we're talking about the northwestern side, there is this river that was going over here, and we wanted to find out whether Ukrainians will be able to essentially prevent Russians from crossing it. and kind of hold the line around this area right over here. But unfortunately, Russians have been successful in crossing this very small river. So right now it is just the beginning, but the fact that they were able to cross it both in this area and this area most likely will allow them to, at some time further, to collapse this part and allow to essentially get to the Donetsk River, closing in this whole section, so to say, allowing to move to Lyman from the northwestern area, creating a second angle of attack. And then the third angle of attack that Russia is doing is going to be here. It's Yampil direction. Yampil is right now under pressure because Russians are moving in from the side, and also if they're established in Zarichne, then they can move from the north. Once Yampil is taken, if it happens, then Russians can move to Ozerne, Dibrova, and move in towards the south. So in that sense, Lyman is going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, I need to underscore that this is not for negativity's sake. I'm talking about this. This is talking for us to understand the situation. Russians are still advancing much slower than anyone has expected. So the fact that the Russian plan is, that I outlined the Russian plan, doesn't mean that this plan will happen, or even if it will happen in certain time that Russia can do. We are in the resource warfare. The country that has more resource, Russia, is fighting the country that has less resources, Ukraine. But this war goes beyond the front line. That is why whenever I do these frontline updates, I want you to understand what is happening on the front line, with all of the good and the bad. And I want you to understand this in a larger picture of what is happening in the war generally. If we're talking about the impact for the war in general, then we need to look at what Robert Magyar, the now appointed head of the unmanned system forces, has achieved in his first days. And the results are staggering. The unmanned system forces went from just impacting a little bit the situation on the front line and the war in general to now actually doing a lot of work. He reported that over the last 100 days, the unmanned system forces are now constituting 2.2% of the total number of troops, and they're doing a lot of work. The improvements that were reported by Magyar, the over 807%, 804.7% compared to the previous results, and increase of targets destroyed. Again, I don't want to take the specific numbers, because if something was having like one of something and then you do two of something, then you are 200% increase. That's why I don't feel the percentage increase is fully accurate here. But the point of the matter is, and the most important from what Robert Magyar has stated, is this: that if Robert Magyar's units, the unmanned system forces, are allowed to grow and reach over 5% of the total number of the Ukrainian defense forces, then at that moment they will be able to cover 100% of the front line, to be everywhere on the front line, and they will be able to inflict more than 50% of all of the total losses done to Russians, which is fantastic, because drone units needs to be scaled up. And if this is the way to go, and we see how efficient Magyar's units have been at fighting the Russian oil infrastructure, Russia is weeping. If this is truly will be scaled, and this will be also happening on the front line, you will see that it doesn't matter what kind of settlement villages Russia will take, the price for it will just be stupidly high. But there is also unfortunate news for us to consider, and that news is that Russians have actually dismissed General Lapin. General Lapin has been a general that has participated in a lot of events within Ukraine. He has been commanding the pretty failing defenses against the Ukrainian offenses around Kharkiv area. He has been commanding the very pitiful attacks that Russia did from the north towards Ukraine, and he has been appointed by and made example that he's such a good general beforehand. And to be honest, secretly, everyone was looking at General Lapin and they were saying, "Oh my God, please do not touch this guy," because he should almost have a monument erected to him within Ukraine. about how much damage and incompetence he has brought to the Russian military. Unfortunately, because he's now also failed in the Sumy direction, he failed in the summer offensive to do anything at the north, and he has been now not only dismissed as being a commander inside of the Russian military, but he has been fully fired from the Russian military. Like, just think about this. Russian military not known by its competence. So being so incompetent that you get fired from one of the most incompetent structures within Russia, that is an achievement of a lifetime, and he will be thoroughly missed. Thank you so much for watching this video. As you know, I am refining the type of content and what is the structure of news that I deliver and how often I deliver. So if you find this helpful, I'm really glad. Otherwise, I will try to do the most to make sure that every video counts, and you are the one that counts the most, because you support Ukraine, and you must continue supporting Ukraine, continue supporting Ukrainian armed forces. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.